of radiation energy received in Nagasaki was mostly that from exposure to X-rays/gamma rays. Contrast this to the environment within 1,500 meters of the hypocenter at Hiroshima, where the in-utero dose depended more on the absorption of neutrons, which have a higher biological effect per unit of energy absorbed. 288. From the radiation dose reconstruction work, the estimated dosimetry at Hiroshima still has the largest uncertainty, as the little boy bomb design was never tested before deployment or afterward. Therefore, the estimated radiation profile absorbed by individuals at Hiroshima had required greater reliance on calculations than the Japanese soil, concrete and roof tile measurements, which began to reach accurate levels and thereby inform researchers in the 1990s. 289, 290, 291. Many other investigations into cognitive outcomes, such as schizophrenia as a result of prenatal exposure, have been conducted with no statistically significant linear relationship seen. There is a suggestion that in the most extremely exposed, those who survived within a kilometer or so of the hypocenters, a trend emerges akin to that seen in SMR, though the sample size is too small to determine with any significance. 292. Hibakusha. The survivors of the bombings are called Hibakusha, pronounced Saibake or Ibake, a Japanese word that literally translates to explosion-affected people. The Japanese government has recognized about 650,000 people as Hibakusha. As of the 31st of March, 2023, 113,649 were still alive, mostly in Japan. 293. The government of Japan recognizes about 1% of these as having illnesses caused by radiation. 294. The memorials in Hiroshima and Nagasaki contain lists of the names of the Hibakusha who Toratu, Nagasaki, Japan. One-legged tortu in the background are known to have died since the bombings. Updated annually on anniversaries of the bombings. As of August 2023, the memorials record the names of 535,000 Hibakusha, 339,227 in Hiroshima, 295, and 195,607 in Nagasaki. 296. If they discuss their background, Hibakusha and their children were, and still are, victims of fear-based discrimination and exclusion for marriage or work. 297. Due to public ignorance, much of the public persist with the belief that the Hibakusha carry some hereditary or even contagious disease. 298. This is despite the fact that no statistically demonstrable increase of birth defects / congenital malformations was found among the later conceived children born to survivors of the nuclear weapons used at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, or indeed has been found in the later conceived children of cancer survivors who had previously received radiotherapy. 299, 300, 301. The surviving women of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that could conceive, who were exposed to substantial amounts of radiation, went on and had children with no higher incidence of abnormalities / birth defects than the rate which is observed in the Japanese average. 302, 303, 304. A study of the long-term psychological effects of the bombings on survivors found that even 17-20 years after the bombings had occurred, survivors showed a higher prevalence of anxiety and somatization symptoms. 305. Double survivors. Perhaps as many as 200 people from Hiroshima sought refuge in Nagasaki. The 2006 documentary Twice Survived, the double atomic bomb of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, documented 165 Nij Hibakusha, Double explosion affected people, 9 of whom claimed to be in the blast zone in both cities. 306. On 24 March 2009, the Japanese government officially recognized Tsutomu Yamaguchi as a double Hibakusha. He was confirmed to be 3 kilometers, 1.9 mi, from ground zero in Hiroshima on a business trip when the bomb was detonated. He was seriously burnt on his left side and spent the night in Hiroshima. He arrived at Hisham city of Nagasaki on the 8th of August, the day before the bombing, and he was exposed to residual radiation while searching for his relatives. He was the first officially recognized survivor of both bombings. 307. He died in 2010 of stomach cancer. 308. Korean survivors. During the war, Japan brought as many as 670,000 Korean conscripts to Japan to work as forced labor. 309. About 8,000 Koreans were killed in Hiroshima and another 1,500-2,000 died in Nagasaki. 310. For many years, Korean survivors had a difficult time fighting for the same recognition as Hibakusha is afforded to all Japanese survivors, a situation which resulted in the denial of the free health benefits to them in Japan. Most issues were eventually addressed in 2008 through lawsuits. 311. Memorials. Hiroshima. Hiroshima was subsequently struck by Typhoon Ida on the 17th of September, 1945. More than half the bridges were destroyed, and the roads and railroads were damaged, further devastating the city. 312. The population increased from 83,000 soon after the bombing to 146,000 in February 1946. 313. The city was rebuilt after the war, with help from the national government through the Hiroshima Peace Memorial City Construction Law passed in 1949. It provided financial assistance for reconstruction, along with land donated that was previously owned by the national government and used for military purposes. 314. In 1949, a design was selected for the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park. Hiroshima Prefectural Industrial Promotion Hall, the closest surviving building to the location of the bomb's detonation, was designated the Hiroshima Peace Memorial. The Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum was opened in 1955 in the Peace Park. 315. Hiroshima also contains a peace pagoda, built in 1966 by Nippon Zanmiji. 316. On the 27th of January, 1981, the Atomic Bombing Relic Selecting Committee of Hiroshima announced to build commemorative plaques at 9 historical sites related to the bombing in the year. Genbaku Dome, Shima Hospital, Hypo Center, Motoyasu Bridge all unveiled plaques with historical photographs and descriptions. The rest sites planned including Hont Shopping Street Motomachi No. 2 Army Hospital site, Hiroshima Red Cross Hospital, Fukuromachi Elementary School, Hiroshima City Hall and Hiroshima Station. The committee also planned to establish 30 commemorative plaques in 3 years. 317. Panoramic view of Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park. The Genbaku Dome can be seen in the center left of the image. The Motoyasu Bridge can be seen in the right of the image. The original target for the bomb was the T-shaped Aioi Bridge seen in the left of the image. Nagasaki. Nagasaki was also rebuilt after the war, but was dramatically changed in the process. The pace of reconstruction was initially slow, and the first simple emergency dwellings were not provided until 1946. The focus on redevelopment was the replacement of war industries with foreign trade, shipbuilding and fishing. This was formally declared when the Nagasaki International Culture City Reconstruction Law was passed in May 1949. 313. New temples were built, as well as new churches owing to an increase in the presence of Christianity. Some of the rubble was left as a memorial, such as a Toratu at Sand Shrine, and Anak near Ground Zero. New structures were also raised as memorials, such as the Nagasaki Atomic Bomb Museum, which was opened in the mid-1990s. 318. A rectangular column rises above a dark stone base with Japanese writing on it. It sits atop a grass mound which is surrounded by alternating circles of stone path and grass. There is a wall around the whole monument, and bushes beyond. Panoramic view of the monument marking the hypocenter, or ground zero, of the atomic bomb explosion over Nagasaki. Debate over bombings. The role of the bombings in Japan's surrender, and the ethical, legal, and military controversies surrounding the United States' justification for them have been the subject of scholarly and popular debate. 319. On one hand, it has been argued that the bombings caused the Japanese surrender, thereby preventing casualties that an invasion of Japan would have involved. 7. 320. Stimson talked of saving 1 million casualties. 321. The naval blockade might have starved the Japanese into submission without an invasion, but this would also have resulted in many more Japanese deaths. 322. However, critics of the bombings have cited a belief that atomic weapons are fundamentally immoral, that bombings were war crimes, and that they constituted state terrorism. 323. The Japanese may have surrendered without the bombings, but only an unconditional surrender would satisfy the Allies. 324. Others, such as historian Tsuyoshi Hasekura, argued that the entry of the Soviet Union into the war against Japan played a much greater role than the atomic bombs in inducing Japan to surrender because it dashed any hope that Japan could terminate the war through Moscow's mediation. 325. A view among critics of bombings, popularized by American historian Gar Alperovitz in 1965, is the idea of atomic diplomacy, that the United States used nuclear weapons to intimidate the Soviet Union in the early stages of the Cold War. James Ball wrote that this idea became the accepted position in Japan and that it may have played some part in the decision-making of the U.S. government. 326. Legal considerations. The Hague Conventions of 1899 and 1907, which address the codes of wartime conduct on land and at sea, were adopted before the rise of air power. Despite repeated diplomatic attempts to update international humanitarian law to include aerial warfare, it was not updated before the outbreak of World War II. The absence of specific international humanitarian law did not mean aerial warfare was not covered under the laws of war, but rather that there was no general agreement of how to interpret those laws. 327. This means that aerial bombardment of civilian areas in enemy territory by all major belligerents during World War II was not prohibited by positive or specific customary international humanitarian law. 328. In 1963 the bombings were subjected to judicial review in Hiroshima v. the state. The district court of Tokyo ruled the use of nuclear weapons in warfare wasn't illegal. 329. 330. But held in its obiter dictum. 330. That the atomic bombings of both Hiroshima and Nagasaki were illegal under international law, as it existed at that time, as an indiscriminate bombardment of undefended cities. The court denied the appellants compensation on the grounds that the Japanese government had waived the right for reparations from the U.S. government under the Treaty of San Francisco. 331. Legacy. By the 30th of June, 1946, there were components for 9 atomic bombs in the U.S. arsenal, all Fat Man devices identical to the one used in the bombing of Nagasaki. 332. The nuclear weapons were handmade devices and a great deal of work remained to improve their ease of assembly, safety, reliability and storage before they were ready for production. There were also many improvements to their performance that had been suggested or recommended, but that had not been possible under the pressure of wartime development. 333. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Fleet Admiral William D. Lee, decried the use of the atomic bombs as adopting an ethical standard common to the barbarians of the Dark Ages.